Viewers, listeners, whatever, we can talk to you for 15 seconds before we start the show.
We're having it. Well, I'll put that down. Phone is off.
Oh, I gotta put my chair up a little.
We don't start with good news, but we have some anyway later.
And we have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Happy Juneteenth. I'm Andy Humm.
We can bring a little more enthusiasm than that.
I'm Andy Humm, and this we have a lot of bad news.
We do.
I'm Andy Humm, and this is Gay USA.
I'm Ann Northrop, and yes, happy Juneteenth. We are taping the day before, but we're celebrating.
And before we get to all the news, bad and good, how are you doing?
I'm doing okay. I'm almost halfway through my radiation treatments. After the show today, I go for my 11th out of 25.
Yeah.
5 days a week, I go get these radiation treatments. They're easy to do. I just lie down and they zap me in a couple of places. But they're supposed to make you fatigued ultimately, and I am getting a little tired. But that may just be that I'm not getting enough sleep. But also watch out for redness, a little burning, like a sunburn.
And?
There's a little pinkness to the skin. But mostly, I'm still a little lumpy and bumpy on the incision. And I want to deal with that because I think I'm holding a little too much fluid. But they won't touch me until the radiation treatments are over. So that is a little annoying. But two things. I just want to reinforce, really, everyone should get tested for anything, whatever. You know, for me, it's breast cancer, prostate, whatever.
Men and women.
Men and women for breast cancer. But really, I am so grateful to have reached a stage where I decided I did need to get tested. And I would hate to have waited any longer. I waited too long as it was. And I just am thankful every day that I have found myself good treatment. And I am getting good treatment. And I really am grateful to everyone at Mount Sinai where I'm getting the treatment because they couldn't be nicer, friendlier, more attentive, competent. It's a real pleasure to be dealing with medical personnel who you just learn over and over again really care about what they're doing and care about you.
Not to change the subject, how are they doing with trans youth these days?
Oh, they're treating trans youth.
They are?
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, good.
Yes.
Okay, we're going to get to that.
Because one of my friends is doing that, and I know that she's still doing that.
Okay, and so, look, the headline news is that the U.S. Supreme Court, by a 6-3 vote, upheld the hate state of Tennessee's ban on gender-affirming care for minors.
Yeah, we'll get into some of the details of that. But meanwhile, we are celebrating the federal judge who blasted the racism and anti-LGBTQ bias of the Trump administration, ordering the NIH to restore its research grants. And another win in the courts for trans travelers.
Trump was responsible for the largest rallies in U.S. history against him on June 14th, no King's Day, in 2,000 cities and all 50 states. And we'll show you what we saw.
And you may have caught a glimpse of his vanity military parade, which was a big bust. And his appearance at Fort Bragg a day or two before, which was marked by discrimination from him against soldiers based on their weight.
He only wants to see good-looking men. Drag queens made the scene at the Kennedy Center where Trump's presence drew boos.
Yeah, do we know anything about his
B-O-O-S,
reaction?
not B-O-O-Z-E.
No, he's famously not a drinker.
No, so supposedly.
That one, I believe. The Department of Veterans Affairs, we have a military theme here today, has green-lighted discrimination against LGBTQ people and Democrats.
This is true, and it's just horrendous. And an evangelical anti-LGBTQ and anti-abortion activist is charged with the murder of the former Speaker of the Minnesota House and her husband, and shooting 2 others.
Even though Senator Mike Lee of Utah tried to claim he was a Marxist. A Catholic church in Syracuse, New York, flew the rainbow flag only to see it vandalized, but there's a happy ending to that story.
The killer of Dominique Remy Fells in Philadelphia in 2000 was convicted of first-degree murder.
RFK Jr. has stacked the CDC's vaccine panel with anti-vax quacks.
Children's Hospital in Los Angeles ended gender-affirming care for minors.
New York State Legislature passed a bill to strengthen reproductive and gender-affirming care. Interesting in light of the Supreme Court decision.
And a school board in Manhattan, where we live, which was dominated by anti-trans members, they were voted out by the parents.
And we saw Jean Smart in her Broadway play. I still can't get over the fact of her going from designing women to hacks, but here's her latest manifestation, which we will discuss.
So the U.S. Supreme Court today, as we tape, upheld Tennessee's ban on gender-affirming care for minors. The vote was 6-3, with the court's 3 liberal members in dissent. Chief Justice Roberts, writing for the majority, said, there's fierce scientific and policy debates about the safety and efficacy and propriety of medical treatments in this evolving field. But it's best left to the elected representatives and the democratic process to decide whether these kids can get care.
Do you detect a theme here? This is what they did on abortion, too. We're not going to say you have to outlaw it, and you don't have to outlaw care for trans youth, but you can. It is legal if you do. Our side, I say, the plaintiffs who had tried to challenge the Tennessee law forbidding care for trans youth, had made an argument for equal protection. You can't just outlaw some kind of medical care for one part of the population. That's crazy.
And they twisted themselves into knots to say, this isn't anti-trans.
Right.
Which is insane.
And it's not anti-sex discrimination either. It's not a violation of parental rights to make decisions about their kids. Now, Amy Coney Barrett, who had made a good decision recently, stood with us on whatever it was. There's so much news. It's a flood. My post-surgery cognitive dysfunction kicks in at this moment. But she and Thomas and Alito wrote a concurring opinion that said, this decision does not go far enough. We would have gone farther in this decision.
You mean banning it in the country or something?
I don't know if they got that specific, but they said, this is not enough.
Well, Justice Sotomayor read her dissent from the bench, and she spoke of the potential harms of the court's decision for the youth and their families, because, this is against parents' rights. Because only the parents,
not according to the court,
only the parents can authorize this kind of treatment. She closed her reading with this: "In sadness, I dissent." Well, transgender and queer rights lawyer Jennifer Levy. When the political system breaks down and legislatures bow to popular hostility, because there's a lot of animus in this, the judiciary must be, wait a minute, I'm losing it, the Constitution's backbone. Instead, it chose to look away, abandoning both vulnerable children and their parents who love them. No parent should be forced to watch their child suffer while proven medical care sits beyond their legal reach.
This is an evolving and constant theme with the courts these days. It used to be, in my youth and yours, that the courts really were an independent bastion of thought that really was devoted to the principles in the U.S. Constitution, but no longer. Now they just want to shove everything back to the states or the people or whatever. And they've done this with abortion, and now they've done it with trans youth. They say, we wipe our hands of this. We don't want to be involved.
You keep pushing us and we're going to secede. That's what I have to say.
If only. But there are at least 20 states that do have laws on the books now banning trans care.
That means
trans youth care.
That means the 30 don't. And New York State, this is news, the legislature just passed a bill to strengthen legal protections for reproductive and gender-affirming health care providers, patients, and supporters. It would ensure that New York will not be complicit in investigations, prosecutions, professional discipline, and other efforts from hostile states to punish individuals who provide such care.
Well, they've had to hold the line with abortion care, too. And this new law also reinforces New York's allowing attitude on that. But states are trying to prosecute New York doctors who prescribe abortion pills through the mail. States will try to go after more liberal states on this, and there will be pressure from within the state. The right wing in New York State, which is not insignificant, will try to push a repeal of laws like this.
And I'm sure, Trump is thrilled about this because it's his number one issue, basically, in terms of, and he says, this is how I'm winning elections because your people are supporting these trans people and nobody cares about them.
Perhaps he will have a parade.
By the way,
I'm saving lives.
By the way, the court talks about evidence. There was a small Dutch study of 70 adults who received puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones as minors, and it found that it is not tied to higher sexual dysfunction in trans adults.
Which is one of the arguments made against early care for trans youth, and this said no.
Oh, it's going to ruin their lives.
Yeah. Yes, people have been shouting that very loudly, and this study, small as it is, says that no, there is no difference in sexual satisfaction and function between trans youth and trans adults, or all adults. So the puberty blockers and hormones, they're saying, are not causing any change in sexual function for people who are treated.
Can we move on?
Please.
Well, a Reagan-appointed judge in Massachusetts, William Young, has ruled against Trump's decision to freeze $2.4 billion in NIH, National Institute of Health grants allocated to research on gender identity and other fields tied to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And he was burning up. He said this freezing represents racial discrimination and discrimination against America's LGBTQ community. And, they tried to make a defense saying we can do whatever we want. He said, look, I've sat on this bench for 40 years and I've never seen government racial discrimination like this. He says, is it true of our society as a whole? Have we fallen so low? Have we no shame? Judge Young, you are speaking for all of us.
Well, for some of us, certainly. But it's so that's what I'm talking about what courts used to do. And we see all too little of it these days. But judges who understand basic principles and are willing to uphold them rather than say, I don't know, it could go either way. There are mixed opinions on this. We'll let the states decide.
Yeah. And then also in Massachusetts, a federal judge blocked the Trump administration from refusing to process and issue passport applications for transgender and non-binary people in accordance with their gender identity. This is U.S. District Judge Julia Kobik, who is a Biden appointee. She granted class certification to this lawsuit against Marco Rubio. And
because they originally 7 trans people had gone to court to say, we're fighting the executive order that says we cannot use our current gender identity marker on our passports or an X marker. And the court had put an injunction on the executive order, and while the case continues. And so then they went back to court and said, not only do we want you to have that injunction for these 7 people, but we want you to expand it to make it a class action suit on behalf of
Yes.
all trans and non-binary people. And the judge said yes and added them to this. And I saw our governor of Massachusetts, the out lesbian Maura Healey,
Yes.
on Morning Joe this week. And she was just wonderful in talking about how she had convened governors from the East Coast, from New England and beyond, to meet with Canadians to
Yes.
say, we need to keep working together. The hell with him.
Secession.
Well, I don't know about that.
Well-
I would prefer victory.
Well, we did have victory on No King's Day, where President Trump was responsible for the largest rallies in U.S. history. 2,000 cities, 5 million at least. This is footage from Ocean Beach in San Francisco, where they spelled out on the beach in big letters.
People, big people.
Yes, with people. No king. What does it say?
I think it's just no king.
No king. No king.
Exclamation point.
People are changing the no parking signs to put the par off, and then it says no king ever here.
Oh, I saw a parking sign that had been adjusted. It was something about Queens, and they had adjusted the N to an R. It wasn't no Queens. It was something about Queens, and they made it queers.
Oh, there you
Cute.
go.
Yeah.
And then these things took place, in big cities, of course, massive turnouts. We were near, but in Wiscasset, Maine. Wiscasset, okay. This is indicative of what happened in the small towns. A massive crowd that they said that makes the line for Reds, which is the local hangout, pale in comparison. More than 1,000 people, closer to 1,500 on a drizzly morning. Lots of energy. And of course, they would hold up signs saying, because they would be along the roads, and they would say, honk if you agree with us. And they said it was an absolute cacophony. This is, something great to experience outside of the big cities.
Well,
that happened everywhere.
This is the explosion of the anger at Trump. This is finally giving people a vehicle to express themselves.
They said even normies are showing up, not just us,
Well, of course.
not just those of us who were paid by George Soros
Sure.
to come to these things.
So let's show you what New York City looked like, Fifth Avenue, I think.
Just filled up Fifth Avenue from 42nd Street down to 23rd Street. It was so wonderful to be with everybody. And I would say this was a more diverse crowd than last time, both in terms of race, but also in terms of age. Usually it's
not just the old people anymore.
So here are the signs. This one says, "Hey, Donald, no one was paid to be here. We all hate you for free."
Protest. It's the American way.
Yeah. And I won't go back in the closet. That was a great sign.
Yeah. Freedom is never free.
No kings, yes, queens.
Patty and Audra agree. Oh, Patty Lupone and Audra McDonald agree. Trump sucks.
That's Scott Gornstein. And
I saw him last night.
It was a brilliant sign.
Yes, yes.
And then at the end of the march, it said, "Our march is over. Keep resisting and stay in touch." And the next big, massive march is going to be on July 17th, a Thursday, most of them taking place in the early evening.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, July 17th. All right.
Yes.
Is that noting anything in particular?
What?
Is it celebrating anything in particular?
Celebrating? We have nothing to celebrate.
We're celebrating
protesting.
ourselves.
Yes, we are.
Okay.
And there's so much to resist. The arrest of Democratic officials from Newark and New York City to Washington, where Senator Padilla was cuffed, the stated intent of Kristi Noem and Trump to replace the duly elected governments of LA and California. They're saying this now. The daily assaults on the Constitution and the extended travel bans. The travel bans, the new ones, you notice they're virtually all from countries dominated by people of color.
Of course. Because this is a white supremacist administration.
Well, he tried to put on a white supremacist parade, his army parade, and nobody came. I mean, seriously, there was so much empty space.
Yeah, that's the viewing stand on the parade route.
We had 5 million. They were lucky if they had 10,000.
Yeah, not attractive for them. And he was going to blame it on the rain, but then it didn't rain.
Well, what put him to sleep?
Yeah, he did. He's getting up there in age, and
Melania fell asleep because it was so boring.
Well, people were just, there are these military guys. He wants
the tanks have to go 5 miles an hour so as not to disturb. So can you imagine?
He wants an impressive military parade with everybody dressed or whatever and marching along in lockstep. Instead, he got guys in camo strolling along who were not in
waving.
Yeah.
Hi, Mom. Hi, Mr. President. Don't send me to Iran.
Of course, they're claiming they had 250,000 in the crowd, but really it was about 40,000.
Well, then, and before this, all supposedly for the 250th anniversary of the Army, he had a rally at Fort Bragg, which is now named after another Bragg, not the Confederate. No Fats, Fems, or Democrats. They specifically said anybody who's going to be sitting behind the president can't be fat. And they didn't want people who didn't agree with the president.
Who wouldn't cheer him.
Yes, exactly.
Well, I have been frustrated by the reluctance of anyone in the military to stand up to him, to quit, to speak out. Because I remember the Vietnam War and soldiers throwing their medals on the White House lawn and quitting or just speaking up about the horrors of the war. And that's not happening yet here.
Because the war hasn't started yet, but it's
about
happening.
It's about when they're sent to Iran. Look, the soldiers, they're either going to go to Iran or California.
No, he's sending them to New York.
That too.
Also. All right. So some of the other outrages coming out of the administration, doctors at the Veterans Affairs Administration Hospital nationwide can now refuse to treat unmarried veterans and Democrats under new guidelines.
Well, any political opponents. It doesn't have to be Democrats.
Now the veterans still have to get some kind of treatment. They don't have to get it from you if you object to their miserable lives. It's just awful. And they're citing the president's executive order defending women from gender ideology extremism and restoring biological truth to the federal government.
And you'll like this one. The trans people being thrown out of the military. They reached a deadline a week or so ago, and you could either leave voluntarily and get an honorable discharge and get a good
$60,000.
Yes, and if you didn't, then and wanted to fight, then it was less good. Well, turns out that Pete Hegseth believes he has to be consistent in throwing people out of the military. So people who are leaving voluntarily are not going to get honorable discharges. They're going to get codes on their discharge papers that indicate that they are liars and unfit for service. Try going and getting a job when that's your discharge papers.
Wait a minute, there was nothing in writing promising them they were going to get honorable discharges if they left?
They were told that,
yes?
But now they've changed their minds.
Go to court.
Unbelievable.
And then
because they want to stick to this line that anyone who is trans is by definition a liar and a treasonous person.
And then I don't know what the Energy Department has to do with that, but the administration through the Energy Department is seeking to rescind key civil rights protections for sex discrimination in sports and education programs through a swift regulatory process through the Department of Energy.
They are circumventing the rulemaking process. This is a little workaround they found. So far, there are 8,200 comments on their webpage about this, and they've made all those secret. You can't read the comments.
It's just terrible.
It is. It's all terrible.
And then
one little bright light: the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, had laid off the workers who were working on sexually transmitted infections and hepatitis. Well, now they're inviting them back.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But, a lot of their stuff has been lost. And the Department of Education will no longer require schools to allow a student of the opposite sex to try out for a non-contact sports team if their school does have one for their sex. I mean, they used to have girls and boys teams when you didn't have a girls team, but they're just. And then, there is some resistance at the Veterans Administration. They're essentially trying to do underground treatment for transgender people.
Yes.
The physicians, either through referrals or just giving it, they're risking their jobs to give them treatment. It's a witch hunt over there. It's terrible being there. But
underground resistance. Because these medical personnel, as I have found personally in the last few months, really do want to do their jobs.
They took the Hippocratic Oath. Not the hypocritic, but the Hippocratic. Do no harm.
But the administration's attitudes and punitive work is still getting through. I read something this week about corporations that are canceling their Juneteenth support.
Yes.
Because it's regarded as DEI by the administration.
It's a national federal holiday.
And they want their mergers, their multi-billion-dollar corporate mergers, approved by the federal government. So they are canceling all their DEI, all their Juneteenth support to protect their mergers.
By the way, one doctor said, you can be investigated for wearing a rainbow pin and things like that at the VA now. Another said, I got to work like I'm going to Pride Rainbow earrings, trans flag pins, and my badge lanyard is basically a beacon. I do that because I can and because my patients need to see someone who is still there for them. Stand up.
And on your off time, you can go back to Disney because they are waving the rainbow flag for Pride. We showed you a little of Mickey and Minnie last week, but this is a really big demonstration of how they're going all out for Pride.
And there was a colorful display at the Kennedy Center where when Trump showed up for his first thing. You all read that he was booed, but these drag queens showed up. Keep their picture up. That's Tara Hoot, Maria Concarne, Ricky Rose, and Vaginesis. And then they came into the hall. They got applauded and Trump got booed.
Yeah. So that was for the production of Les Mis, some of whose cast members refused to perform for him, too.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the Fulbright board has resigned because this is all congressionally appointed, but Trump is interfering. Some of these kids, students, had gotten their scholarships from the Fulbright, and some of them are coming here, some of them are going overseas to study on Fulbrights. And it's all being pulled by the State Department. So the board just said, the hell with it.
Well, I remain a little confused about whether it's better to stay or go.
Leave the country?
No, stay on the board and just refuse to go along with them and speak up.
Well, the woman who was the head of the National Portrait Gallery, she did resign.
Yes,
even though
Sayet is how we pronounce her name.
She did resign, even she was quote unquote fired by Trump, but the board was ready to back her up. Mm-hmm. And then she just said, I'm getting the hell out of here.
Yeah. All right.
Let's talk about the Minnesota assassin. That was one of the biggest stories of the week, Vance Bolter. He was an evangelical preacher in the Congo. He allegedly killed, Minnesota House Speaker Melissa Hortman and her husband Mark, and then
wounded the other couple.
State Senator John Hoffman, also a Democrat.
Yeah,
he had a 70-strong list, including Tammy Baldwin, he was going to kill.
Yeah. He covered several states.
But he says that he met Jesus when he was 17 years old and gave his life to him, and obviously has abandoned him at this point.
I'm sure he would find a rationale that Jesus would support this.
In that sermon in the Congo, he said there's people, especially in America, they don't know what sex they are. They don't know their sexual orientation. They're confused. The enemy has gotten so far into their mind and their soul. I think something that got into your mind and soul is Satan.
Well, at first he was described as whatever, but it turns out his friend said that he'd voted for Trump, and he's
totally MAGA.
Yeah.
Anyway.
But Senator Mike Lee of Utah was tweeting out that he was a Marxist. And this is what happens when the Marxists don't get their way.
All this because originally he was on some bipartisan board. He didn't have a political affiliation.
And Governor Tim Walz had
reappointed him after Governor Dayton had appointed him. Yeah. So that's on that basis, you're a Marxist. We're all Marxists. All of you. Thank you for tuning in. All right. Oregon House of Representatives approved a bill this week that would prevent anti-LGBTQ book bans in schools. It's up to Governor Tina Kotek to sign it, but...
And in Kansas, an appeals court lifted the injunction and ordered the government to allow transgender people to change their gender on driver's licenses.
Right. Florida's wicked governor, Ron DeSantis, did order flags to fly at half-staff to honor the victims of the Pulse, 49 of them killed 9 years ago. But unlike in previous years, no mention of Hispanic or LGBTQ communities in his declaration, because that would be DEI, wouldn't it, Governor?
But he has some new opposition in his legislature.
Wait a minute, I don't know if I'm
finished.
I don't know if I'm finished with that.
Oh, sorry.
Wait a second. Sorry. Originally he used to do that, but I just want to say, Republican Rick Scott was the governor at the time of the Pulse massacre, and in his remembrance of the Pulse, he did include, obviously, Hispanic and LGBTQ people.
There is discord within the Democratic Party, as you know, different factions turning up and beginning to
turning on each other.
Yeah. Well, we told you that David Hogg and Malcolm Kenyatta had been thrown off the governing board. And now Randy Weingarten, the out-lesbian head of the teachers union, and another union...
Lee Saunders, the president of AFSCME.
Yes, have withdrawn from the DNC governing council.
Yeah.
So because they say the new chair of the Democratic National Committee,
Ken Martin,
is too narrow in his focus.
Out of step with the leadership we are out of step with the leadership you are forging.
Yeah.
I mean, look, we're all going to have to get more aggressive. I mean, you can see a lot of Democrats are getting more aggressive.
Yes.
Our own mild-mannered governor used a bad word when she talked about what Trump was doing to immigrants this week.
And our city controller running for mayor got himself arrested trying to help an immigrant in court.
Okay. Sarah McBride, the out transgender member of Congress, was interviewed by Ezra Klein about the falling support for transgender issues, and we'll link to that in our email. But she said, look, by every objective measure, support for trans rights is worse now than it was 6 or 7 years ago. But it's not just isolated to trans issues. I think if you look across issues of gender right now, you've seen a regression. Marriage equality support is actually lower. Well, it's really not just among Republicans, but it was a couple of years ago. And you can see that about whether women should have the same opportunities as men compared to 10 or 15 years ago. So yes, there's a retrenchment going on.
Which is why I was so moved, and I'm going to throw our director a little curve here, by the Sally Ride documentary that ran the other night on National Geographic and is now running on Hulu and Disney+. It was amazing and so moving. It really almost brought me to tears because I remember that
There's
time
Sally
vividly.
and out in space.
So it's so interesting because it's the story of her fight as a woman to be accepted as the first female U.S. astronaut. The Russians beat us to it. And really looks at her in depth and has a lot of video and audio of her talking about this as she went along. Really amazing material. But at least half of the documentary was about her and her partner, Tam O'Shaughnessy.
There they are together.
For decades. And we learned, for instance, that Sally had a female partner, a different one, throughout her 4 years at Stanford, and had a much richer life than we have been led to believe, because she truly was an icon. one of the biggest icons ever. And this documentary was incredibly, incredibly moving. I can't recommend it highly enough.
I shall watch it.
Sally on Hulu.
Sally.
Yes. And you can also watch the documentary on HBO about sexual assault at Ohio State by the team doctor of the young men under his
And do they
care.
implicate Congressman Jim Jordan?
They do. They talk about him a lot and his denials, and really make
I don't know anything about it.
Make a fool of him and quote him referring to it.
We can't get rid of him.
Yeah.
All right.
That is Surviving Ohio State on HBO.
So we told you about the murder of 27-year-old Dominique Remy Fells, a transgender woman, in 2020 in Philadelphia. Well, this week, Akhenaton Jones was convicted, first-degree murder by the Philadelphia District Attorney. Fells' upper body was found floating in the Schuylkill River. Her torso had 40
dismembered.
3 days later, legs are discovered in a trash. It was hideous. Her mother said, the verdict brought justice for her daughter, but it doesn't take away the pain of losing her. Dominique's life mattered, and we're going to continue to honor her in every way. When she expressed deep gratitude to the DA there
for persisting on this case over so many years. And you remember Daniel Hernandez,
yes.
the man in Arizona who helped Gabby Giffords. What did he do? Tackle the gunman?
Yes, he was her aide, and then he got elected to
a local office, but now he's running for Congress. Excuse me. He's under attack. Recently, there were gunshots fired outside his office at home, and so he's requiring extra protection.
Stop the violence. And you never hear Trump condemn any of this kind of violence.
Oh, heavens no.
That's what you need every time.
Except when he gets shot.
Yeah, well. By the way, we told you about how Simone Biles went after Riley Gaines for being such a sore loser, the turf. Well, now she's apologized. I didn't mean to personally attack you. I do think that we should treat these people fairly, and Riley Gaines is celebrating.
Yes. In Naples, Florida, we told you that the Pride Fest drag show scheduled for outdoors won a court case and was reinforced in its right to hold a drag show, a family-friendly drag show at Pride outdoors. Well, at the last minute, it was forced indoors by a decision from the appeals court, which claimed that the decision was based on safety issues, not free speech. We're not interfering with your free speech. We just want to make sure everybody's safe.
Last week, I told you that our friend Ann Charles at All Things LGBTQ in Vermont did a wonderful interview with out Congress member Becca Balint. They're up there in Vermont. I sent out the wrong link in the email, and so I have corrected it. If you sign up for our email at gayusatv.org, go there and you will get on the list and you'll get these links. And it's also a chance to support us with your annual Pride donation.
But it's just one email a week.
That's
I think
right.
Everybody can handle that.
Should we go to Syracuse?
Sure.
On the first weekend of Pride Month, the Pride Progress flag there was stolen from All Saints Roman Catholic Church. That's why this is news, and later burned. We have a video report.
All Saints Roman Catholic Church in Syracuse re-raising a pride flag today after their initial flag was ripped down and burned earlier this week. The church affirming their support for the LGBTQ plus community.
We fly the pride flag to let GLBTQ people know that this is a safe place and that all are welcome. And this is not the behavior of Catholics. All are welcome. God created a diversity of sisters and brothers. We're all children of the one God. And
Pastor Daly says the church does not know the person who took and burned the flag. The new flag was donated by Syracuse native Eric Hart, who created Syracuse's first light flag.
And I think that's all very encouraging, and it's certainly progress for the Catholic Church. But a curious reporter might have said, "You're doing gay weddings here?"
Well, I look forward to the Vatican and St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York flying the Pride flag.
They ought to.
Of course, they ought to.
And by the way, my alma mater, University of Virginia, closed its DEI office this week. New York City.
Why don't you go yell at them?
I didn't go to my 50th reunion. I don't have the energy. New York City, we have a big mayoral primary on June 24th. We're already voting. And among LGBTQ voters that were surveyed, Zoran Mamdani, this hot guy, is, who in terms of politics, has a slight edge over Andrew Cuomo in the primary.
That's among LGBTQ voters. Yes. In the general population, Cuomo has a 10-point lead over Mamdani, but falling.
Keeps falling.
Yep.
But you know, the clubs, none of the clubs listed Cuomo. So everybody's saying, don't list Cuomo on your ballot. I mean, come on.
I didn't.
You know, there's lots of progressive candidates running, and call me if you want some advice. And then in Manhattan, you know, again, we're not trying to be too local here, but we kept telling you that we had a school board here that voted anti-trans. So they had a school board election. Only parents get to vote. And the worst of them, who's aligned with Moms for Liberty, Maud Marin, she lost. And she's now going to run for DA against Alvin Bragg.
It's quite a leap. In Ohio, they have a law that forbids DEI at public universities. It also forbids any stance on controversial issues, including the existence of LGBTQ people.
This is insane.
Ohio State University, Kent State, and the University of Toledo have closed their LGBTQ student centers.
These are places that cannot even protect wrestlers from sexual abuse.
For decades, by the way, that went on. Decades. And they all knew about it. Surviving Ohio State, HBO.
In Los Angeles, Children's Hospital is to close its Center for Trans Youth Health and Development and Gender-Affirming Care effective July 22nd. You're just going to have to come to New York, I guess. And how about that Tyler Perry?
Oh my God! Well, you know, there have been rumors.
He's being sued for $260 million by a guy for sexual harassment, assault. A guy in his employ, in his movies.
Derek Dixon.
Yeah, it is quite a list, and of course, the Tyler Perry people are denying it entirely.
Yes, they're calling it lies and just a trumped-up blackmail attempt. Tyler Perry has been the subject of rumors for many years about his sexual orientation, but that, of course, doesn't.
He doesn't talk about it.
He does not. But it's like a well-known.
And he's not an illiberal filmmaker. I mean,
not at all.
Basically, his politics are pretty good.
So, is the actor taking advantage of that knowledge, or was he really assaulted by
the question? Basically, he said, "Look," Perry said, "if you don't come across, you're getting cut from the show. So,
right.
So just do what you have to do."
And according to Dixon, actually pushed him up against walls to sexually assault him.
We await the trial.
Yeah.
We talk about who we lost.
Sure.
Clement Kai Lee, who was the associate director at the Immigration Legal Services at the Sex Workers Project at the Urban Justice Center, has died at 42. Did all kinds of great work. He used to work at Make the Road. He was a 2016 recipient of the LGBTQ Bar Association's Best LGBTQ Lawyers Under 40. So it was a beloved figure in the immigrant community and among people of color.
And the work he did. And I don't think we know the cause of death, nor do we know the cause of death of Chef Anne Burrell, who we just got news of this week.
55.
Out bisexual, found collapsed on the floor of her kitchen, which is ironic.
She was the host of the Food Network show Secrets of a Restaurant Chef, co-host of Worst Cooks in America, all these shows. But in 2012, she did confirm that she'd been in a relationship with her girlfriend, Chef Corin Grieveson, for 2 years.
Engaged.
Yes, but at the end, She ended in 2020. She ended up marrying a man, Stuart Claxton.
Who survives her?
Her cause of death, not revealed.
Also, well, not known. They'll do an autopsy on her.
All right, international.
Yeah.
Well, British lawmakers voted on Tuesday to prevent women from being prosecuted for having an abortion in England and Wales. You would think it was fine, but they have an old law from the 1861 that they were using to make it a criminal thing. So if a woman had a miscarriage, they could be investigated. Did you have an abortion? That would be criminal.
Well, in this country, there are places where just having a miscarriage is considered criminal.
So Parliament has really moved on.
They've expanded the
right to abortion.
Yeah. And it turns out, that horrible Air India crash last week killed 200 and some people. A well-known gay couple was on that flight and were killed. British gay couple, creators and proprietors of the Wellness Foundry. A sad loss.
Awful. J.K. Rowling is not just an anti-trans activist. She's come out against asexuality, calling the International Asexuality Day back in April Happy International Fake Oppression Day to everyone who wants complete strangers to know they don't fancy a shag. So it's very easy to say bigoted things when you have
JK,
billions of dollars behind you.
Yes, exactly.
Just look at Trump.
Oh my God.
All right. AIDS health.
Yeah.
So RFK Jr. has appointed anti-vax crackpots to the CDC's Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices. And we're all going to be in trouble because of this. These are people who, like this guy, Robert Malone, who routinely claimed there were 17 million excessive deaths from COVID shots, and et cetera, et cetera. These are wackos. And it's just people whose licenses have been taken away. This is just horrendous, and it's not being stopped by Congress.
Well, that's why we had 5 million people in the streets this weekend, and we need 50 million or 200 million, 300 million. Let's keep it going. Well,
apparently we have to get 12 million out and stay there. I mean, you really have to, it has to become more than just an afternoon where we carry signs. And we're certainly making our numbers known, but you have to tie things up.
Absolutely, which is, as I have said ad nauseum on this show and elsewhere, is how we ended the Vietnam War, was a constant string of demonstrations that got bigger and bigger and bigger, and just a refusal to collaborate.
Right. All right. And entertainment news?
Yeah. There were, we've just finished the Tribeca Film Festival here in New York, and there were a lot of LGBTQ films, including some particular documentaries. The one on Sarah McBride, one on Barbara Jordan, the late legislator from Texas. I saw the one on Carl Bean, Born This Way, which was the original version of the song, and then Lady Gaga did a new version, not the same song. And actually the best parts of the documentary for me were Lady Gaga talking about that and how much he inspired her, and Billy Porter, who's in it throughout, searching for Carl Bean's archives. Carl Bean was singer, songwriter, and reverend and AIDS activist, and really
was
amazing guy.
And ended up going from a big church to a small church as a result, but he had integrity.
He really did. And there's one on Chase Strangio too.
Yes, that was at the New Fest, I think.
Yes, you're right.
Yes.
But there are a lot of documentaries, and keep your eye out for them.
I'll probably be seeing Chase tonight. If you're in town, I'm going down to Washington Square at 5:00. If you're seeing this on Wednesday, to protest what the Supreme Court did to transgender people. GLAAD came out with its Studio Responsibility Index, and it shows representation for us is declining by 3.7% in 2024 films. We will link to the full report in our email.
Well, that's one reason I was so impressed by the Sally Ride documentary, because there was nothing like, oh my God, about it. It was all very integrated and very normalized, and very, here's who her partners were, and here's this, and here's what she went through. And and her thinking about it. And
did they get into, like, I mean, look, I realize to do what she did, probably it would have been very tough to be out. But towards the end of her life, she never did it on her own. I mean,
well, she talked to her surviving partner about Tam,
yeah.
who was much more interested in being out, had lived an out life.
Like, when are we coming out?
No, what do you want me to do after your death?
Oh,
it was while she was on her deathbed, and they discussed it. And Sally said, "Do exactly what you want to do. I completely trust you, and it's fine."
Okay.
And we had reported that at the time of her death. But again, it's so moving and so evolved in its treatment of her and them, and integrating all the subjects. If you're not old enough to remember her at the time,
it's very exciting.
Oh my God, she was, as they said, the most famous woman in the world. So you take the most famous woman in the world in the 1970s, I guess, early 70s, or mid 70s, and say, should she come out?
Well, no, see, these days, everybody's more aware of that people have different sexualities, and it sort of gets questioned,
right.
But it wasn't then.
Well, they lived a very full and open life among their friends and family. She had a lesbian sister. Bear was also a lesbian. And the family was totally accepting. So it was simply the public realm.
Well, we did the Pee Wee Herman thing. And of course, his sister was Abby Rubenfeld, who was a lesbian activist. And she used to say to him, come on, aren't you seeing what I'm doing? Don't you want to do it too? No.
I think he's a little different case than Sally Ride, but whatever. And did we miss this Tony?
Yes, and we told you about the LGBTQ Tony winners. Well, Paul Tazewell, who won an Oscar, last year for Wicked for costume design, was the winner of Best Costume Design of a Musical for Death Becomes Her.
Congratulations, Paul.
Yes. And he said, I think it's necessary for young people to see someone who looks like them, and that's why he's so out.
Well, he's halfway to an EGOT, but how does he win a Grammy?
Can you sing, Paul? All right.
You saw my son.
Well, let's do Jean Smart first. Right. Jean Smart, we love from Designing Women, from Hacks. But she now is a one-woman play at Studio 54. It's not the Jean Smart we know from those other shows. We're in a trailer park in Mississippi, and despite the character being a trained poet, she's stuck in a really abusive relationship. So it's not a feel-good story, despite some humor. Mm-hmm. We do root for her, but it's a lot to go through, mostly in her bathroom, where she surreptitiously writes on toilet paper so she doesn't get smacked around by her husband. So that's a slog.
It is. One review I read said, we love Jean Smart, we don't love the play.
Yeah.
And I thought that summed it up pretty well.
She's a wonderful actress, but it's not.
Is.
But it's sort of. I don't think it made best use of her talents.
I agree completely. I do think reading the phone book would make better use of her talents. But
didn't the person you went with fall asleep at some point?
Yes, he did. But as we came out of the theater, as I said to you, I would much rather have had her just do a few monologues from Hacks or from Designing Women.
She's stretching herself. She's a big star now.
She did last summer at Bluefish Cove decades ago. A lesbian play. But I certainly yearn to see her in something better.
So I finally saw My Son's a Queer, but What Can You Do? This is a British import. It was a big hit in London. It was supposed to have a Broadway run by non-binary writer-actor Rob Madge, and it's all about them showing home movies from when they were a child, where they were like involved in having Disney parades in the living room with the full support of the parents and the grandma and everything. So it's kind of charming that way, and almost like in a Pee Wee Herman kind of way, but without the edge, I would say.
When I was young, we would act out the Mikado for my parents. I still know all
Three
the
Little
songs.
Girls from School?
Are we?
I love the Mikado. I just rewatched.
It's fantastic. The Gilbert and Sullivan movie?
Yes, what's it called? Topsy Turvy.
Yes.
It is the best show business movie I have ever seen. It's directed by Mike Leigh, who mostly makes kind of grim stuff about working class people. But this was a recreation of the making of the Mikado in the 1800s.
Well, the Mikado, which has since been redefined as racist for good reason, is nonetheless extremely entertaining, and the songs are just amazing.
Right. By the way, changes at Mary. Trans actor Jinx Monsoon will soon play the Cola Scola role, Mary Todd Lincoln, in Mary on August the 4th for eight weeks. Cole's final performance is June 21st. I think it's the end for them. And then Titus Burgess is taking over on June 23rd for 6 weeks.
Didn't Jinx Monsoon do the Pirates of Penzance?
Yes.
Continuing our Gilbert and Sullivan theme. Look how we tie all this together. These little segues just appear to us.
So
Pride is coming up in New York City, the Pride events, in not this weekend, but next weekend. Friday night, the Drag March, Tompkins Square Park,
we'll be
7 o'clock. We will be there.
And you're marshalling.
I am marshalling. I'm wondering whether I really have to come up with some kind of costume.
Going to do a little drag?
I'm sort of in drag. I now, by having had a double mastectomy, I now am buying a few shirts at the Men's Warehouse because they hang better and they're not constricting and they don't have darts. And so this is a Men's Warehouse shirt, and you'll see a few more of these. I
go to Old Navy these days. They're cheap.
Very. But Drag March Friday night, 7 o'clock, Tompkins Square Park. And then Saturday night, the Dyke March, which
what time? 5?
I think
Bryant
so.
Park?
Bryant Park, and then marching down to Washington Square Park. A little controversy over Middle East politics in that.
I imagine there'll be even more with what's going on in the world.
Very possibly. And then 2 parades on Sunday. The traditional main parade, which we'd like to think is getting a little more political this year as they have lost a lot of corporate funding.
Although they donated $100,000 to community groups with some of the funds
they've done that
raised.
for years. They sort of got urged to do that some years ago. Hey,
well, they did make grants to community groups.
Yes, they have for a long time.
And then
Karine Jean-Pierre is one of the grand marshals.
Oh, right. Who's no longer a Democrat.
Right. Let's see how people react to her.
She'll be marching with Randy Weingarten, I guess.
Maybe.
Look, you just don't vote for Republicans at this point. I'm sorry. There's just tell me one that's good these days.
Well, and it's
Don Bacon in Omaha.
Even if they are good, the point, as is so often true, you need to have their power taken away because they are doing such terrible stuff to us. So you can't vote for Republicans even if you like them because they're only going to reinforce
that
the power.
Is something that people don't understand. They don't understand if you don't control the majority, you don't control anything.
Right. In Congress, certainly.
All right.
But yes, then we'll be at the Queer Liberation March on Sunday.
Meeting at the AIDS Memorial at 11 a.m. on 7th Avenue and 12th Street, marching to Lenape Circle, which is 8th Avenue and
59th Street.
59th Street.
And dispersing into Central Park as the original marches did.
Well, the original one ended up in the Sheep Meadow.
Right. So maybe there again. All right. Well, that's it for us.
We're wrung out, but we'll be back next week.
There's always reason to hope, as Whoopi Goldberg says. All right. Bye. See you next week.
All right. And we